Hello and welcome to 24 Panels Per Second, the comic book TV and movie podcast from the Comic Crush. Today, I'm sure you can guess what we're going to be talking about. It's going to be this, Superman. So, bringing Liz on here. Hi Liz, how you doing?
I'm great.
I'm I'm really excited to talk about this film. And I know you probably are as well. Like this has been a long time coming, right? So we've kind of feel like we've been waiting for this or a new Superman movie for a long time. It's the new DC universe, which I'm also kind of I'm excited and optimistic about that. And this one has kind of really been talked up by James Gunn, who's directing the film, and by Warner's, who are kind of releasing it but not. So it's DC Studios is apparently its own thing, much like Marvel. There's no Warner Brothers logo at the beginning of the film. They kind of share promotional responsibility but not oversight on the film, I'm told, or James Gunn has reliably assured everyone. And this kind of picks up the reins from the really quite dour Zack Snyderverse, which wasn't a Snyderverse really. He was the most prominent. I was thinking about this the other day. I was just penning a quick written non-spoiler review for the film, and I was thinking it really wasn't his universe. He certainly was the most dominant filmmaker there, but it really wasn't. And it kind of, I wonder if that was partly the problem, is it sort of lacked direction.
I think that at the time, he had put out Man of Steel, and that was it was never meant to be the first film in a universe.
No.
And it just so happened that they had him kind of helm the, Batman versus Superman, which was originally going to be a Superman sequel, which wound up being this overstuffed introduction to the entire Justice League, essentially. Because they were trying to catch up with Marvel. But they did it in a very clunky, unwieldy way that didn't really work.
Yeah, and I feel like the whole kind of lot suffered through that. And of course, the Snyder stuff proved very diversive, because initially the attitude was get him off these DC films, and then the attitude was get him back on, and it was just this complete yo-yo of emotions. And of course, there was the kind of very the slightly combative nature of fandom that seemed to come out of that, and I think was just brewing in the ether at the time. I mean, you had it with Star Wars, you had it with pretty much every major series and franchise was kind of experiencing this very bumpy sort of period of aggression, really. Yeah. And I certainly contributed to that. I felt, I know we've done reviews. We were doing reviews of things, the Star Wars stuff and things at the time, and I felt quite annoyed by the direction they were taking. So I've learned since then, I hope, to sort of sit on my emotions a bit more. Well, I have. I feel,
I haven't.
Yeah, but I think the difference is your enthusiasm is usually quite transparent, whereas I think I've let my anger reign a little too much. So we'll try and be kinder and gentler. But here we go with this film, Superman. Not really a reboot or a continuance of what has gone before, but a film that very much starts in media res. We're told at the beginning, 3,000 years since metahumans first appeared on Earth, 300 years since, what was it? I can't remember what the beginning of the film is now.
Yeah, there's quite a few points that are all on the three. That
it's the rule of three, but done twice. They do it kind of, so there's like 6 points it brings up. One of which, of course, is 30 years ago, a baby was rocketed to Earth from a dying planet. 3 months ago, Superman appears. 3 minutes ago, he loses his first fight. Didn't you find this a fascinating way to start the film?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, and I think, I didn't read any of James Gunn's interviews, that he did before the film. I think he did actually come out and say, now that I've seen it, I kind of go then then I'll read stuff about it.
Yeah.
And apparently he did say out of the gate, like, oh, we're not going to do, him, landing in Kansas and, being raised by his parents. We're going to start the story, after all that stuff that we've already seen a bunch of times done in other films, because it's unnecessary, which I think is very smart. It's what they did with Spider-Man, when they introduced him to the MCU, and they just skipped the death of Uncle Ben and all that stuff that you already know, you've already seen it. So I think that was the right move. You do land in the middle of like the action, and in the middle of a fight, and in the middle of a very complicated storyline, which it unfolds and you can follow along with it, but it kind of just stampedes out of the gate.
So it was the idea is that 3 weeks before, Superman has flown into the country of Barovia, the fake country of Barovia, and when we'll get onto this thing of fake countries and
conflicts
and unreal things in the Unreal universe, but and they're just about to essentially cross the border and invade a country called, now you'll have to help me out here, do you remember?
Joranpur,
right. And he flies down and stops this invasion. As he puts it, minimal damage, minimal casualties. He tells the president of Barovia off in a very stern way, which we'll get to, and stops the invasion and basically intervenes, not on behalf of America, but on behalf of Superman, on behalf of himself and behalf of humanity as he sees it. And that has these unintended repercussions, or not entirely unintended, because they are intended by somebody in the film, that begin to kind of unpick his life and his existence on Earth, and results in this beginning where he's really had the crap kicked out of him. And what I found interesting about that, as the film unfolds, I mean, loads of things are interesting about it. As the film unfolds, he's never quite at full strength. He's never quite got the God-like strength. And one of the things James Gunn has said is that he doesn't want him to be that powerful.
Yes, I did read that, and this, like I said, after I watched the film, which completely makes sense. It's like, you want him to be Superman, so you want him to have the powers that he has. You want him to have the super strength and the laser vision and the X-ray vision and all the things that he has. But you don't want it to feel like this character who's completely infallible and basically, what would be the point of having a Justice League at that point? What does he need their help for? And so we see throughout the film, and it's pretty relentless, him just getting his ass kicked.
And there is something quite refreshing about that. It did kind of remind me almost of the way Marvel treats, poor little Peter Parker sometimes. Like he really does come across it. And we see this great sequence in the Fortress of Solitude where he's Crypto drags him home. He's recharged by the Superman robots, which I don't think we've ever really seen in the any of the filmed or TV universes. and they were a great addition. And those in themselves are fascinating because they hint back to an era of Superman that predates kind of when I jumped on, which would have been John Byrne. And as with a lot of the film, they kind of hint back to the Silver Age of DC, the bonkers DC Silver Age, as we used to call it.
Absolutely.
And there's a lot of that in the movie, which I'm sure we'll get to. And we see him kind of healed and recharged by the sun. And then straight back out into battle. And one of the things you kind of get from the film is it never wants to stop.
Right.
It does not have time. It does not have time for your shit. It's just like, yeah, we're going, and you catch up. And one of the things that's interesting about that thing in Barovia is that in another film by another filmmaker, that would have been the inciting incident. That would have been the first scene of the film. And there would have been a 10 or 15 minute sequence where he flies down into Barovia and tries to stop it. But instead, it's just like, hey, this thing has happened. The film started 15 minutes ago, and you just weren't in the room to see it. So we're going, and here's what's happened. And I think that's great because what it says is, try and catch us if you can. Catch up. See if you can keep up with what's going on. And yet the plotting is still very clear. But it's kind of saying, yep, we're going. And you know, it's in the film's runtime, so it's like 2 hours, 9 minutes rather than the 2 hours, 39 minutes you would have had normally, or 59 minutes. It's not a long film, and I struggled to find a portion where I could nip out of the cinema and use the loo because, you know, I'm an aging man with a weak bladder. I've got to go to the loo, and I was like, oh man, where am I going? How am I going to do this? Like, come on, because the film is just going.
It moves very fast. Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, as you say, you know, it kind of expects you to just like, you know, keep up. You know, particularly at the beginning. And like, you know, maybe it would have been nice to have that opening sequence where, you know, he shows up and, you know, saves everyone who needed to be saved. You know, I felt like, you know, on the one hand, I really liked the way it started in that it just kind of like, you can figure out what's happening pretty quickly, but you also feel like you're like, oh, you know, you're a few steps behind. You know, if I wonder if, you know, there was a version of the film that had that as the opening sequence and had to be trimmed off.
I don't know. I have no idea really. Because the opening is very atmospheric and kind of it's immediately it's not like you get through the whole film and then someone pops up and says, well, there's a bigger universe out there, as with Marvel, which is one approach and a great approach. But what it tells you right at the beginning is, yeah, there's a whole universe of these guys, and you know, there's all sorts of things going on. This has been going on for thousands of years, and there is a much bigger universe, and this is what's happening in it, and that carries right through the film. You know, the plot's already in motion. You don't see Lex Luthor sit there and form a plan to take down Superman. That plan's already started. Like, it's already begun. And, you know, you don't see Maxwell Lord form a Justice League. They've already been formed. They've been going for however many months or years or however long it is. And they're already out there, and people are used to them. People are used to a Green Lantern. I mean, for God's sake, they're used to Mr. Terrific. They're used to Hawk Girl. You know, although they've clearly not been around for that long, because I think, as with all those things, they would become wallpaper after a while. They are kind of, people are like, taking photos, and it's new, it's fresh, but
yeah, they haven't properly formed a group. They haven't decided on a name for their group, although Guy Gardner certainly has decided on a name for their group.
And I love the fact that the film just didn't want to stop. It doesn't want to stop. And what it reminded me most of was really good runs of the comics, because what you see, the endings and big instances that happen in most films, Marvel films, DC films, all of that, that would be a slow comic run.
Right.
If that's all your comic run was, you'd be like, come on, man, like, when's the action going to start? Why am I, this is it's like a decent 3 or 4 issue miniseries, and we're going to ram it all into one issue, and we're going to just put it out there. And that's what I kind of really loved about it. Sorry, go on. You were in the middle. You wanted to say something there.
Well, okay. So there was one instance that you actually mentioned yourself that I actually thought. So now, I guess I'll just go ahead and say I loved the movie.
Me too.
We'll get into that more. There are so many things about it that I thought were fantastic.
One thing I have got to say is, if you've watched this for 16 minutes in, it is going to be full spoiler. Obviously, that's what we do. And I will put it in the title of the podcast. And attached to this will be a link to a non-spoiler review. We haven't really given much away at this point, but there will be a non-spoiler review.
Right.
Sorry.
So with that caveat, I will say that I think my only, real quibbles about the film have to do with that catching up period.
Okay.
And I think, part of that has to do very much with what you just mentioned, which is Lex Luthor and his plot to take down Superman. I feel like, while Nicholas Hoult was like great to watch, loved his performance as Lex. I thought it was probably like the best Lex since I've seen since Michael Rosenbaum played him in Smallville, who I thought was terrific. But I don't feel like I understood Lex's, and as a Superman fan, like I do understand Lex's motivations, but as a moviegoer, I don't think you really understood Lex's motivations until nearly the end of the film. And I think that wasn't particularly, I mean, you understand that he's, he hates Superman. He's out to get Superman. He's embroiled himself in this, conflict between these two countries, and he's, secretly working with the president of Barovia, and, you see what he's doing, and he hates Superman, but you don't really understand why until almost the end of the film. And I felt like, I would have really been interested to see more of Lex and like just shades of his motivation earlier in the film.
Okay, that's interesting, because I think as comic fans and long-standing comic fans, you assume a certain amount of knowledge already, and that's interesting. I didn't really think about newbies, but I don't know.
It's not even that. Even me as a moviegoer, just like it's like, okay, I know Lex Luthor hates Superman, but why? Why does this Lex Luthor hate Superman? Like, what is he doing? What is he doing involving these other countries? Why is he going to these lengths? What is, what really is it that he's trying to do? And, by the end of the film, it's like, oh, he's jealous of Superman. He wants the adoration that Superman gets. He thinks that Superman's undeserving and that he should be getting the accolades because, of his great inventions.
But did you not feel that in a way that was a kind of punchline to a joke? Because it's, when you come down to it, it's actually quite a small thing. This sort of jealousy is actually quite a childish and small, small thing. And did you not feel that was kind of like a?
I felt like that. I agree that that's what they were going for, and I think that it worked, because by the end of the film, I was like, oh, like that moved me. But like, earlier in the film, I was like, okay, I'm like, Lex Luthor is one of my favorite villains in DC Comics.
Mm.
And I wanted to see more of his like humanity, earlier, because I felt like we spent most of the runtime with him as just this really cut and dry evil villain with very little dimension.
Yeah, I guess I'm not sure if I kind of agree, but also I think that I'm choosing to ignore it.
Okay, yeah, and like this is honestly, I have
I'm
a
not
million
saying
nice
you're wrong,
things,
but...
right? I'm not, but I have
Who's the real Lex Luthor amongst us two, eh?
I have a lot of really, really positive things to say about the movie, but this is one that I'll go ahead and say, okay, this is a criticism, and I'm excited to see more of his Lex Luthor. I thought that he was great, and I thought that by the end of the movie, when you actually see the emotion come into his performance, it was like, wow, like that was great, and that's what I would have kind of liked to see more of throughout the film.
Yeah, I mean, I loved his performance, as I did all the performances of him. I actually came away from this having really, really adored every bit of acting in it.
Yeah, and it's not a criticism of him as an actor. It's the script.
No, not at all. Interesting enough, did you know that he tested for Superman?
I could believe that.
Yeah, and did you know that apparently he tested for Superman on the same day that David Corenswet came in to test for it?
Oh, wow.
And he said they literally passed each other on the lot of the studio. And what happened was that apparently, as Nicholas Hoult tells it, he said that he saw David Corenswet coming towards him, and he was like, "Oh, he's a bit bigger than I am, and he's about a foot taller than I am, and he's got better hair than I've got, and he's better looking than I am." And he said, and as David Corenswet stepped forward into like a ray of sunshine, and he was just like, I'm not getting this. And he knew, but then he was invited to play Lex, which I actually think is the kind of more. He's always like, the villains always feel like the meteor roles.
Yeah, and I like I said, Lex I think is like such a great villain, such a great character, and I thought that Nicholas Hoult, he's was really perfect casting, and I think it wouldn't have worked as well had he played Superman, simply for the fact that he's like a face that we know. He's a like actor that we already know pretty well, and like I think for Superman, going with the sort of more or lesser known actor is the better choice.
I always think that's choice. I always feel like Batman has got to be played by someone mildly famous, and Superman has to be played by someone fairly anonymous.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that's, I don't know if it's because of the secret identity thing, even though, we know Batman has a secret identity too, but there's something about that I just feel has always worked.
I feel like there's like a suspension of like disbelief element, with Superman, especially like, it's just like you want to just, believe that he's Superman.
And also like when you talk to older Hollywood actors who were offered the original Donner Superman, like I think Warren Beatty said he was offered Superman, and they sent him the script with the costume, with a sort of fake Superman costume, and he said, I put it on and I ran around my swimming pool and I looked at myself in the mirror and I just went, nah. And apparently like James Caan was offered Superman, Robert Redford was offered Superman, but it only works. Even I think in the end they were so desperate they got down to, speaking of unknowns, Richard Donner's wife's or assistant's dentist, and there is a screen test of this completely unknown guy testing with Anne Archer, who was a sort of actress on the rise at the time.
Wow.
And but it only works when it's Christopher Reeve. I don't know why. And I think I think Corin Swint is just like, I've not seen a single thing that he's in, or nothing I'm aware of. Anyway.
Me neither.
Right. And just absolutely amazing. Absolutely.
Like note perfect. Like, literally he just embodied the character perfectly, both as Clark and as Superman. And what I thought it was interesting too, to slightly change gears, is that we get very little Clark in the film. He's almost Superman the entire time. Yeah.
And I missed Clark a little bit, but I think what was happening is because if you look at like Rachel Brosnahan, it was really good as Lois Lane.
So good.
Just amazing. And believe, and this is what Corin Swint has, and Rachel Brosnahan both had, which was believability as human beings and people and living in the world. And I think Rachel Brosnahan and Skylar Gisondo as Lois Lane, as Jimmy Olsen, who is the next most adorable thing in the movie after Crypto. They were all, and Corin Swint were all given moments to be journalists in this.
Yeah.
And they fuck it up and they get it right. And in fact, a large portion of the film hinders on them being good journalists and getting a story out. And that stuff was great. And I think because those moments were in the film, they felt comfortable discarding a lot of the Clark Kent stuff.
Yeah, they made the Daily Planet stuff work as part of his character, even though it's not like at the forefront all the time. But I agree that was done really well.
And I did feel that Wendell Pierce as Perry White was shortchanged a little bit.
He was and hopefully I don't think this is going to be the first of these films. I think we're going to get more Superman films, and hopefully we're going to see more. And I think we saw just enough, to establish him in the role. And I think he's a great bit of casting.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's kind of like, well, maybe we'll see more of him next time. It did have it had a very stacked cast. There were a lot of characters. Oh, and I really, when you say he got shortchanged, I feel like we just saw him, and it was like, okay, there's Perry White, cool. But they had just this huge cast to juggle, and I actually felt like, that said, most of the characters got great moments.
Yeah, well, not shortchanged, but I mean, there wasn't. I'm greedy and I wanted more.
Yeah.
Of Wendell Pierce, and just like I wanted more of Isabella Merced as Hawk Girl, because I don't feel she had enough.
Yeah. I liked that they gave her one really good moment.
Yeah.
And she was kind of like the straight man of that trio, so she was kind of there to just like, kind of give these dry responses to like these, zanier personalities. Like you've got Guy, obviously, who was just hilarious. Yeah. Nathan Fillion as Guy Gardner, like, I thought he just kind of stole every scene that he was in. And Hawkgirl's kind of there to just be like, you guys are idiots,
Yeah.
And just, be kind of the cool one.
And that is the thing that's interesting about the movie, is that we start, as I've said, we start in an existing superhero universe. So we've got super villains. We've got the Hammer of Barovia, despite the fact that that's a big kind of fake out. We've got the Hammer of Barovia at the beginning.
Ultraman,
yeah. We've got
the engineer. Cool character.
Yeah. Although I'm usually kind of against the sort of Magitech characters. I don't know if you remember some of our conversations from like not Endgame, but I think the other one.
Black Panther. I'm trying to think of
from
that really emphasize
the other half of Infinity War.
Right, okay.
was, sorry, I'm getting old. I really can't remember these things now. But some of my problems there were with the constant kind of blitz of technology that does everything you want it to, no matter what situation you're in. However, I think part of the kind of world that they're building is that, yeah, like there's magic, there's this, there's that, there's this crazy weird science happening.
And part of that, I mean, like that, because I thought that the tech, like, you know, visually it looked really cool. You know, it felt very comicsy. And it's, you know, it's there to show you, like, you know, how smart Lex is, basically.
Yeah.
And you know, that he could create something like, you know, that basically he can build his own metahumans.
And this was the most comic book movie since, I think, the Spider-Verse movies. The ones that really got it right, that really got through the dynamism and the movement and the even to a certain degree the colors of a comic book movie. Because I always feel that that's the thing that can never really get right, is the color. You know, the way comic book colors are completely artificial and yet completely correct for what is going on in the panel and the frame and the story that's being told. And it is its own kind of special alchemy, comic book coloring. And of course you can replicate poses, but it's really difficult to replicate art. And I feel that there's obviously a lot of talk before the movie came out about All-Star Superman, written by Morrison, drawn by Frank Whiteley, and how this was kind of they kind of suggested that this was based on that, and it isn't.
Not at all.
There is no plot that
resembles that movie, but I think part of what rubbed off on the movie from All-Star Superman was the, you know, that sort of like love and reverence for the goofy Silver Agey elements, you know, of Superman's history, and I feel like that you know, like if you're looking for it to, you know, be All-Star Superman, you're going to be disappointed, but it has those ingredients, like, you know, like obviously that's the stuff that Morrison loves to play with. And I feel like that stuff is peppered through the whole film.
And also I feel what you know, you're absolutely right there. What else rubbed off from All-Star Superman was, if you look at Frank Whiteley's panels, when he has multiple characters in a panel, even if there are background characters, those background characters have their own little arcs. Like there's things going on, especially in the stuff in the early issues in the Daily Planet offices. There's lots of stuff going on, and I feel that was kind of taken from that book. So it's like, you know, as you say, it's the spirit that's there, and I feel the spirit of the art was there, and especially in the giant kaiju, because that could have been something that quietly
designed, absolutely,
or designed. It actually really reminded me of. Do you remember in Orbital when we had the you guys all drew the panel, like you would draw those panels that hid the back issues that weren't ready to go out yet and stuff. And Joe did a really great Jeff Darrow panel of the big monster breathing fire from I think it's from Big Guy and Rusty Robot. Yeah, and that really reminded me of that. So on a personal note, I felt like a little flutter in the heart there. And again, like the movie clips on, and the idea is really that they're trying to keep Superman on the back foot and busy, and they're keeping you busy, and they're keeping me busy, and we get things that would normally be the end sequences of films on their own, just rammed in there, just happening now. You know, you get this giant kaiju, which I thought was great and adorable, and I love that. And that's our introduction to the Justice Gang, right? Am I right? That's
I believe you're right. And like And I thought it was really funny because, you know, it's like their approach is completely different to Superman. Superman's like, okay, guys, so how are we going to get this guy out alive and, like, you know, and take him to a zoo? And, you know, we're going to have to find a really big zoo. And they're just like, yeah, no, sorry, man. Boom. Like, you know, here's some explosive, like, spheres in his gut from Mr. Terrific. And I thought that Mr. Terrific, like, you know, like just showing up in like his flying chair, you know, was really hilarious. Like, you know, he's just like, and we'll talk about Mr. Terrific some more because, like, you know, that was a surprise for me.
But there, the real person that gets to shine is Guy Gardner.
Yeah.
The attitudinal kind of, you know, fuck you of it all, and I really liked it. And I like the fact that they weren't afraid to have characters be complete arseholes. Right. And he was an arsehole.
Yeah, exactly. And he was
belligerent. He's not a bigot because he is out there saving lives, and he doesn't care whose lives he's saving, but he's saving lives. You know, that's when I'm being a hero. But he is quite, you know, later, you know, there's that fantastic crack about his haircut.
Right.
Later.
Yeah. I mean, and it's like I couldn't have thought of better casting, you know, for Guy Gardner than Nathan Fillion. Like, he completely gets it. Like, you know,
I was really surprised and quite worried about the tone of the film, I guess, when he popped up in the trailer, because it's like, how are you going to pull that off? Look at that stupid hair. And
well, it's Guy Gardner.
They went there. They committed to it. They committed to the bit, and I love that they committed to the bit. And he really lit the film up whenever he was
there. Yeah. I felt like he was just like kind of chewed up every scene that he was in, and like, you know, it was just like a joy to watch.
I bet he had an absolute blast doing that.
Yeah, you could tell.
You know.
It was like, have you ever seen Dr. Horrible's sing along? Like, right. It was very much like the you know, like a little bit of the Captain Hammer, you know, where he's like, I'm here to save the day, but I'm a giant jerk, you know.
Yeah.
But doesn't know that he's a giant jerk, you know. He thinks he's the best.
Yeah. I think that, but I mean, it's like in that scene where she attacks his haircut, and he said, well, 347 women feel different. And it's just like, I can't believe they said that. It's literally reeling off the women he slept with. Yeah. And you can't do that in a superhero film.
Well, again.
And the whole kind of, I don't know, it's interesting to watch these characters be kind of as flawed as they were. Superman, I mean, like, look at that whole scene where Lois Lane interviews him and just picks him apart on everything, and it's just like, yeah, she's right though. She's right. You kind of, you did act like an idiot, and you were very impetuous, and you did this stupid thing.
Right, and but then you also get like his you know, frustrated response when, you know, he actually yells at her, and it's like, well, they were, you know, those people were going to die. What else could I possibly do? You know, and that's exactly who he is, you know, but she's right about everything that she's critiquing him for. And so it's like, it shows you that it's a complicated thing. Like, you know, he's, you know, potentially causing more problems by being there, but he, as, you know, as who he is, couldn't walk away and allow it to happen.
Yeah. And you see a lot of that in that Kaiju sequence as well, and the way that he saves people, and in that sort of opening to the kind of Hammer of Barovia sequence. Is it that sequence where he rescues the woman and just sort of sets her down on the roof, or is that, no, that's the Kaiju sequence?
That's later. That's later, yeah. But there's quite a few of those scenes in the movie, and I feel like that was what, you know, and like the Snyder movies were criticized for this, rightly so. And there really weren't those small moments of like Superman saving the day for, like, you know, just you know, individuals, and you know, you saw all these big, you know, explosive fights, you know, where all these buildings were being destroyed, and you know, it's obviously just mass casualties happening everywhere. But there were no small moments of like Superman, oh, I'm going to save this person. I'm going to, whereas this movie is loaded with those moments.
Yeah.
And it really, really reminds you who Superman is and exactly what he's all about. Like when he's like holding this giant boulder up to like, because it's going to land on this dog, and then the dog just barks at him and stands there.
I love that. And I think it's very sweet. It's very affecting. You like, I feel the film had a lot of heart, especially in the crypto scenes.
Yeah, we'll have to talk about Crypto a little more at length.
The world's most annoying dog. Even I found him quite annoying at times.
Well, that's the point. I mean, you go in expecting it to be like, oh, Crypto is like faithful companion, and Crypto's actually like a bad dog. He's like, like goes just, as soon as he's like, Crypto, you take me back home. He's like, just jumps on him and hurts him some more and bites his leg. And, it's really, really funny. It's exactly right. It's like, it's not what I expected. And that made it even better.
I did wonder how much damage when the Superman robots have him and on the bed and they're analysing what damage has been done to him. I did find myself wondering if there was going to be a crack about how much damage the dog had done when but I kind of, as with you, I really liked that stuff. I really think it humanized the film. And I feel that it just made it a bit more believable in the context that it was in. Because I mean, it's an interesting thing watching this movie, in that what was really missing, which it's been very noticeable in Superman films and all superhero films since they really came to prominence, was there were no brands. There was no Starbucks. There was no this. There was no that. There was no, Hershey's chocolate bar tie-in. There was none of that, because they seem to create all that stuff from the ground up and make all these fake brands, right up to the point where they make fake bands that Lois Lane and Clark have grown up with. And I really like that, because that is DC Comics. Because if you go and look at DC Comics, they don't have real brands. They used to, and then slowly it's kind of, they used to have, real presidents and real politicians pop up in DC Comics, and I'm sure, in Marvel as well. But now they don't. I guess partly because the rights around those things have got more tricky. But also what I like about it is it builds the world whole for you, because when you and I go out, you see this store, that store, this coffee brand, that coffee brand, and I actually really liked the fact that they took the effort and time to build all that stuff.
I would say even like just the look of the world there, you're in the contemporary world, because you have like that character Eve snapping selfies and and various things like Ma Kent yelling into the cell phone, which was really funny. And it's the look of it, like the look of the Daily Planet, the look of the clothes that they were wearing, and just a lot of the aesthetics, you felt like you were almost stepping into like the past, like there was almost this kind of 1970s look to the Daily Planet setting, and it was very like a blend of the aesthetic of different Superman properties and Superman timelines. You could almost look at it, and feel like you were in the Donner verse, or in the like animated series verse, with some of the the wardrobes, and right down to his costume. It's like the classic Superman costume.
And it's not, I liked the fact that it's very, people were scruffy. They were kind of, Lois Lane was quite scruffy, in a little kind of capri cut off trousers and waistcoat, and Clark's suit was kind of scruffy. and it all looked lived in. They didn't look like they were wearing costumes. And I think that kind of extended a bit to the characters themselves, because when you look at previous versions of Superman, yes, Clark Kent is very awkward, but there is a stoicism to Christopher Reeve. There is a sort of stoicism to Brandon Routh because he was kind of aping Christopher Reeve's performance. There's a kind of stoicism to Cavill. There isn't to Tyler Hoechlin, and I feel that Corin Sweat's performance was somewhat informed by the stuff that Tyler Hoechlin had done. And I kind of like that. I kind of like that slightly shambling, thrown together kind of look to it all, and the attitude of the characters. I really like that. I believe those people were those people. You know what I mean? And that is important, and we take it for granted.
But it's very noticeable if it feels inorganic, you know.
Because sometimes actors can wear those characters like they're wearing a costume, and it's just like it's not like it's different. And yeah, I love the suit. I think the suit was great. Like I really liked his look. I like the hypno glasses thing. I think that
I thought that was very clever.
Which apparently is a real bit of lore. Like it is a real,
but it's
existing Superman lore, which I didn't know, and I love that moment again with Gardner, where it's like, and you know that he's Clark.
I know.
She's annoyed because
I know, because if she didn't know, it's like I know. Yeah, it was really good.
And I loved all that. And I think that kind of brilliant characterization extends to Eddie Gathegi as if I'm saying that right, I hope I am.
Mr. Terrific.
Mr. Terrific. Yeah. Like, great. What a great.
I mean, like, and that's a character I was just like, you know, I can't say that I was that bothered. You know, it's like, oh, okay, Mr. Terrific's going to be in it. Woohoo. And then, you know, because he's such a sort of like D-list DC character.
Well, there's some interesting stuff there because it's weird. Justice Gang, and you look at Guy Gardner, and you I guess what your mind goes to as a comic fan is Justice League International,
right?
But Mr. Terrific wasn't part of that. Mr. Terrific was very much part of the Justice, like the sort of mid 2000s, early 2000s version of Justice Society, I believe.
Like the Jeff Johns.
Or the Justice League, yeah. The Brad Meltzer kind of Justice League of America, which is a run that probably doesn't get enough attention. But I actually want to read soon because I do happen to have like a complete run of it. And then Hawk Girl is very much Justice Society, I believe, like later versions of Justice Society. So it's an interesting mix of characters. I don't know why they picked those three.
Well, I mean, as far as like James Gunn, it makes perfect sense that he would choose these kind of like, you know, of the Green Lanterns, he's gonna choose Guy Gardner. Of course he is.
Yeah.
You know, and of the, you know, because I think, you know, from what I understand, the approach that they're, you know, planning to take with the Green Lantern TV series is something kind of dark, and you know, they've described it, you know, it's been like compared to sort of a True Detective type vibe.
Yeah, and also I think that the Green Lanterns in that won't actually be Green Lanterns anymore. I think they're kind of, I think it's a time when Hal Jordan and John Stewart are ex-Green Lanterns, and Guy Gardner it's the reason why Guy Gardner is the current Green Lantern. But I love how they don't stop to explain it to you. Guy with you know, man with magic space ring just says like, yeah, I'm a Green Lantern, and it's like the most powerful weapon, and that's it. That is all you need. And I love how that's kind of that spirit is contained throughout the film, and no one stops to explain Mr. Terrific's T-spheres.
No.
Other than to tell you that they're called T-spheres. no one stops to explain how Hawk Girl's suit works, or the Hawk screech, which I loved. I thought that was great.
Yeah.
You know, when you get that towards the end, and you're, you know, it becomes a real war cry. And stuff isn't explained to you, and I
like, you know, I thought it worked perfectly. It's like, you know, I think especially now, especially after, you know, 10 plus years of you know, just superhero films being like the dominant, you know, presence in cinema, you don't need explanations for everything. And I think that they like treat the audience as though they're intelligent enough to just go with the flow. Which, you know, at this point it's like, yeah, absolutely. Like, you know, everybody's got it. Everybody knows, yeah, this is how superhero films work, you know.
Yeah.
It's totally fine, you know, that, you know, guy has like a giant green, you know, hand, you know, punching out of the earth and giving the middle finger.
Don't you feel that this should kind of almost be the approach for X-Men? Like, when they finally get there, like, don't you, like, I kind of feel like, oh yeah, just do it, man. Don't bother.
I hope they do, because, like, you know, otherwise you're just going to be like, you know, back at this like kind of square one with like the slow build storytelling, which we've already seen in you know, the X-Men films that have come before. I just, you know, I think at this point you don't need those, like, you know, the setup and the explanations. You kind of just, you know, you can keep up.
Yeah, and I think again that's what the film dares you to do.
Especially with well-known properties like, you know, like the X-Men, like Superman. You know, it's like you already know the characters basically to some degree or other. Whereas, you know, if you were introducing a brand new character that, you know, audiences genuinely don't know, you know, then maybe you need the origin stories and, you know, that sort of thing.
And I think it's something that kind of I think it's kind of something that carries through the film, and even though there are things in this film that, as a Superman fan, as a person watching Superman media, if you want, beyond the comics, I'd never seen before. You know, you really kind of get a sense of, okay, so the world exists and you've just got to go with it. And I don't know. I know I keep going on about this. I'm kind of stuck in a loop now because I just can't.
Yeah. I was just thinking, like, you know, that's, you know, yeah, let's do what the film does and move on.
But the point is that things like this can happen.
Yeah.
Which was one of the big publicity shots.
Yeah.
And what you can't see in this shot is the Justice Gang fighting this interdimensional imp, apparently. And that, you know, things are happening in the background. You know, major things are happening in the background, and
he's like, oh yeah, they've got it covered. You know, and then him and Lois have this really emotional you know, moment. Which I actually thought, you know, it was kind of like this, you know, it was kind of a comedic backdrop on the one hand, but also this kind of beautiful backdrop on the other. And I think, you know, we should touch on the fact that, okay, this is like a funny film. There are like a lot of laughs to be had throughout the film.
All the way through,
and it's like, and it's absolutely James Gunn's brand of humor. And I don't think he overplayed his hand with it either. I think it was just the right amount of James Gunn's humor, while still like feeling like a Superman movie, you know, and not like, oh, okay, this is a James Gunn movie first and a Superman movie second.
Yeah.
So I thought that the balance was there. I thought the balance was right.
Did you know that they talked to James Gunn about Superman all the way back when he was fired from Disney? Did you know that?
I didn't know that
until recently. Yeah, so apparently when he was fired from Disney, he was invited in for a chat, and I can't remember who it was. I think it was Toby Emmerich at Warner's went to him. Okay, Superman, and he was just like, "Nah, I'm not ready for that."
Well, maybe he wasn't then, but
Yeah, and then of course you have that whole sort of, I guess, 3 to 4 years where it's the next Guardians film and
Suicide Squad movie, obviously.
Suicide Squad, which was a terrific film, and we both really love. And now obviously he's come all the way around, and he's like, okay, now I'm ready for Superman. I found out some interesting things about James Gunn over the last week or so that I didn't realize. I didn't realize that in his life he'd been an addict. He was he said he felt he was addicted to weed, and then moved on to like cocaine and things, and then had gone through sobriety and things like that. And it kind of really deepened my understanding of him as a human being. Do you know what I mean? Like, and to see how he could then go from Suicide Squad and Guardians and things like that and arrive at this. And for fans of the open the fucking door moment in Guardians 3, there's language in this which I was surprised at. There's actually quite a lot of fairly liberal language. It's not over the top, but it's there. And I mean, Superman, I love the first word that he utters, after this whole sequence of oh, Crypto, you've got to take me back to the Fortress of Solitude to heal. He's like, golly. Yeah. I loved it.
And he's like, gosh, what the hey? I mean, he's still Superman. He's still a square, and he's still obviously
he's still the Kansas farm boy.
Right, exactly. And I love that. I think the characters who, I think you get a few swears, because of the whole social media hashtag, like super shit, or super
shit is my the thing is, you can't use that. I've been dying to use that in like stuff I've been doing, but you can't use it without it being misunderstood at this juncture. But that was fantastic. Hashtag super shit was, and that point where it was like, how much that one really upsets me. I love that.
I know.
Because he is fallible. He is impetuous. He is an emotional Superman. And I really love the fact that that emotion is in Clark and it's in Superman and it's in those two things. And that carries through.
Yeah, and I did want to touch on the humor briefly because I think it's going to divide certain audiences. I think there's people who are going to go into the movie. I think to a certain degree, people who are like, I don't want a James Gunn Superman movie. I don't want that. They're probably not going to like it. There's because it is a James Gunn Superman movie. It absolutely is. As much as it's like, a Superman movie at the forefront. If you don't like James Gunn's sensibilities, they are there. They are present. So I think it will, the kind of diehard Snyderverse, fans are probably not going to love it. I think there was an attitude toward it before it came out that it was going to be a woke Superman movie. I think a lot of people, that's another thing that, I think there are people who are going to go into this wondering if it's going to be that. I don't think it was that. I don't think it gets very political.
There's a great cartoon by Jack, by the artist Jack, from the New Yorker this week, which is a guy falling off a building and Superman rushing to save him, and the guy is shouting out, save me, but not in a woke way. And that was brilliant. And I've been sharing that on socials, and I've got to give a shout. I should have actually queued it up as one of the visuals for the episode. But one thing you can't escape from the film, and I know you probably won't be pleased about me talking about this, but it is a political film. There is no freaking way you can avoid it, because it's very much about a billionaire trying to enforce his view on the world through the media.
I suppose. I mean,
a lot. Well, Liz, I'm sorry, but so much of the film is made of he's an illegal alien. It's there's the invasion of
Jaranpur,
which is very much the Ukraine, and it's just like, yeah, okay, and it's just like they've hit. I think it's the perfect amount of politicism for the film, and I don't think you can escape it. But
okay, but
I will say this:
I don't think. Okay, all right, fine, you go first.
Okay, I will say this: the film doesn't hammer that stuff. It does hammer it home, but it's not. What they're not hammering home is what's going on in the real world. What they're hammering home is, hey, this is a metaphor about how you treat people, and that's fine. And I liked it because of that. But also, before people start whining about how they don't like their films political, I would ask you to reach back into your minds and think about the first 3 Iron Man movies, in which a billionaire arms dealer changes his mind about the direction his company is taking. And also, as the movies go on, you get to deal with false flag terrorist operations, which you do in this. You also get to deal with state-sponsored terrorism, which you kind of do in this as well. I would also ask you to think about the Captain America movies, in which the second film is very much Edward Snowden and what the stuff that happened there. And I would ask you to think about that in all 3 Captain America movies, Steve Rogers triumphs because he disregards the orders from the government and goes and does what's right. And I think that, and don't even fucking get me started on all those X-Men movies. Political comic book movies have always been there. That is what they are. If you don't like that, then maybe you've picked the wrong medium. But yeah, I think it's very much there, and I think the film is much better for it. So that's my.
Right.
And now Liz is going to tell me why I'm wrong.
No. Actually, I am in complete agreement with all of that. What I was going to say is, like, as much as that stuff is absolutely, you're correct. Like, it's totally present throughout the film, and it is, it's the plot of the film. It's the backbone of the film. But the message of the film was more about being a good person. It was, and that like, that's not a woke sentiment. It's a human sentiment.
No.
It's nothing ever felt like, you were being preached at, or, none of it felt ham-fisted. It felt like it was the, like, the spine, the action part of the movie, is what, all of that kind of played into, and that's like, it I didn't feel like I was being, fed any kind of propaganda or anything like that. It was just like, well, this is what's happening in the movie, and this is something that happens in the world, and and it's based on ugly, true situations, and but it's really about this character, figuring out who he is and how he navigates those things that are happening in the world, and what the right thing for him to do is. And
as you say, I think what it's really saying to you is, look, maybe try and be a good person. And it's something I'm trying to reconcile in my own life lately, which is maybe we need to start choosing humanity first. Like, what is the humanity of a situation and how we treat people?
And that was like one of the little notes I loved about the movie is, like, you kind of mentioned earlier, the conversation between him and Lois, where she's like, oh yeah, like, I was this punk rock kid, and he was like, oh, well, I like these bands, and she's like, yeah, those are lame. And later, they touch on that again a little bit when they go to his childhood bedroom, and she sees, like, the poster of this, kind of lame band. But, like, they, near the end of the film, they have a conversation. It's like, oh, what's the true punk rock? It's being kind to people.
Yeah.
And the song, like, that they play at the end of the film, which is like a song with like Iggy Pop as, like, the guest vocalist. is like called punk rocker, and it's like, yeah, like maybe the actual real cool, like going against the grain punk thing to do is be good and kind and like, you know.
And also it's you know, that is the essence of a lot of things now. And
it's like Superman, you know, notoriously Superman's corny, Superman's lame.
Yeah.
And it's like, but that's what's cool about it, you know? And I feel like that was kind of really like one of the major themes of the movie.
And as you say, the film doesn't preach. I think I did more preaching in the few minutes there talking about it than the film does.
Right.
But it is like I do feel that political element is there, and you've got to be aware of it going in. And I wonder how much of the audience is going to come out and be kind of huffing and puffing about it. I don't know. Not that I'm looking for a fight. I really don't know. What I would rather is that people come out with the same feeling I think I did, and a lot of other people did. Not because I want people to be in agreement with me. I don't care about that. But I felt emotionally recharged after the movie. You know, I cried by the end.
Yeah.
I think the scene with him and Lois right at the end is absolutely beautiful.
Yep.
And I teared up. I was crying, and I was glad that the credits were so long because it gave me a few minutes to.
Yeah. I was really moved by it, and like, you know, the scene with his parents, you know.
Yeah.
And you know, we didn't even touch on this, but you know, they do a major like switch, you know, with his real parents.
Yeah.
And something that, you know, as far as I know, has never been like a comics plot, at least, you know, in a mainstream, you know, or main continuity Superman story.
In Superman Birthright, there is the plot line of Superman Birthright. The entire book is spent, I think, with him trying to get a message back home because of the way light and sound travel in space. He can send them years later. He's trying to send a message to his parents before they die that will reach them just before they die because of, you know, I mean, things that I can't explain, science, because of science.
Yeah, comic science.
Yeah, and the message he's trying to get back is, I made it, I'm okay. And a large part of the book is about that. I don't know if you ever read Birthright.
Like I have, but so long ago that.
So part of that is kind of from that, I guess. Also, there was stuff in Smallville about the idea that Jor-El actually wanted him to come and conquer. So the big switch is, first of all, is Bradley Cooper playing Jor-El. I can't remember the name of the wonderful actress that plays. I can't remember. See, I can't even remember her name now. Is it Zara?
I'm not like familiar with the actress either. But
the name of his mother. I don't know why.
I can't remember either.
Terrible comic book fans we all is.
It's like I know like her name, and just because you're fumbling with it, I'm like, oh no, I don't know.
Because I always get mixed up with Kara Zor-El, who's Supergirl, and then Zara.
It's like
I think it's Zara or something.
I think it's like
that.
Lara.
Lara, yes. Sorry, you're right. It's Lara. Anyway, and there is this kind of undecoded, broken message that comes through, which at first seems quite benign, but is then later deciphered by Lex Luthor as being, go forth and conquer the simple humans. But you're never told. Now, Clark at the beginning claims, when that message first comes to light, and it's to the credit of the characters in the movie, or the writers of the characters, whichever way you want to do it, that they don't they don't immediately attack him. They kind of block him off from people and, ask him, what the fuck, what's going on here? And I liked that.
Yeah.
About the film, because none of those guys are aliens. Obviously Guy Gardner has kind of alien connections, but he isn't an alien. So it's not like they have some sort of otherworldly plot. But we're never told 100. Clark says that, okay, the first bit of the message is real and accurate, but the second bit was broken and I never knew what it said. And we're just told, oh yeah, all these linguists have looked at it and they've all said, yeah, it's real. It's 100% real. But you never find out whether or not that's the truth. We're just asked to kind of accept it. And again, to the film's credit, they don't try and say to you, oh yeah, it's actually big rug pull. It was all faked.
As far as this movie is concerned, it's true.
Yeah.
If they decide to take that in a different direction, like further down the road and say, oh, well, actually, we've retranslated it and it actually doesn't say that. That's a plot line for another film. But for this film, we're meant to believe that actually his parents, wanted him to come and conquer.
And funny enough, I was sort of browsing on Reddit today, and someone in one of the DC movie Reddit threads put up a picture of the Superman poster, and he said, "This film has changed me." And I read the thread, and he's basically like, don't let them, don't become. It essentially is that same message that I think is throughout. Logan, that film, which is don't become what they make you. Don't let other people decide your destiny. Choose your path. Maybe choose to do good, and that is very much a strong theme in the film, as imparted by his parents.
Well, yeah, absolutely. It's like because of who his parents raised him to be. He is the man that he is, and even though his birthright might have been, aristocracy and to rule, and that might have been what was expected of him, had he stayed with his real parents. He was raised, by good people who gave him good values and good morals, and ultimately he has to choose his own path, but they set him up to do that.
Yeah, and I love that. I like the fact that his parents are actually quite sort of, they're not beautiful, bucolic old movie stars. It's not Glenn Ford or Eva Marie Saint. It's Pruitt Taylor Vince, and I think it's Nova Howell, who I don't know as an actor. But she was great, and I liked how real they felt. Again, it's realness. The characters feel like real people, and I think that's in a film that is full of so much artificiality and so much unrealness. It's great that they managed to make all those people seem real. Who else haven't we talked about?
Metamorpho, because
Metamorpho. Again, my God. One of the weirdest things in the film.
One of the weirdest things in the film was here's another minor quibble of the film. The baby, the CGI of the baby was a little off, I thought.
I didn't care.
I mean, I didn't really care. It was cute, but if any CGI moment took me out of the film, it would have been that. Small enough quibble. The actor who plays Metamorpho is have you ever seen Barry?
Yeah, sure. He's no Hank, right?
Yeah. Who's hilarious. As soon as I knew, I was like, oh my God, I can't even wait to see him as Metamorpho, because he's like the scene stealer.
And also
that show.
I believe in, I don't know if it's Gotham, but he played Mr. Zsasz.
Of course.
Yeah, he was Mr. Zsasz in one of the DC shows. It might have been Gotham or Teen Titans or
Yeah, one of them. Oh, interesting. Yeah, now that you say that, I completely, that just came back to me too.
Yeah. So he's had his own. I loved how much emotion he filled that part with.
Right, because it's a smallish role, but definitely memorable, and by the end of it, it's like he's part of the Justice Gang.
And we should tell the audience that moment where they are playing Russian roulette with the life of Amir, is it? Yeah,
and that was okay. That was another. Okay, all right, we'll talk about it. Go on.
Like genuinely evil from Lex. I feel that's the moment when he slides from cackling villain into, oh yeah, this guy is evil. Now,
so here's my problem with that. I don't really think that that's Lex Luthor. So that was one of my little Lex quibbles, with the film was I don't think that that's what Lex Luthor would do. I don't. That took me out of it a little bit. I was like, that's not Lex is smarter than that. It didn't work for me. That didn't work.
Okay, so the reason, I've been thinking a lot lately about, I don't know if you remember, it was kind of pre-Skinny Lex, but James D. Hudnall and Eduardo Barreto did this fantastic one-off prestige format thing called The Unauthorized Biography of Lex Luthor, which pops up. In fact, I've got one for sale in the Superman shop right now, which pops up now and then in back issue stores. And in that, it's about a guy who gets the job to write Lex Luthor's unauthorized biography, or he's kind of a desperate, down and out writer and reporter, and in need of money. He kind of goes. He's on the phone to a publisher one day, and he goes, how about a biography of Lex Luthor? And of course, that just seals his fate. But as he digs into Lex Luthor's life, he finds out that Lex Luthor, when he was just a little boy, murders his parents. So it's just like, for me, I'm like, yep, he could totally do that. But also, I think it's an important moment in the film.
Okay, this is interesting because, it was one of my quibbles with the film. But it is, irregardless of how I felt about it, it is an important moment in the film. Because as you say, it does really hammer home, oh, he's really evil. I
think at that point he's going mad.
Right. And this is really this is the thing that Superman couldn't tolerate, couldn't handle. It's the worst thing you could do to Superman. So but I just didn't, I felt it was out of character for Lex, who's this incredibly calculating man, to do something so random and, so kind of, sort of senselessly violent and sort of this, blunt instrument type violence. And so, to me, it was well, I get what you were trying to do to move the plot forward, but I don't think that that's what Lex would do. And that's my feeling as a fan of the character.
See, I liked that moment in one respect, because it's I can see how far they're going with this now and what they're trying to really drive home about the character. And also, I think I loved the kind of thing of first Superman cries and Metamorpho stays silent, and then when they're gone, Metamorpho begins to cry over, what the fuck am I doing it? What am I doing it?
Right. And I could buy Lex sort of, playing the part in someone's death if it would further his agenda, but not in that way.
Okay. That's interesting. That's interesting, because I really liked that moment as much as one could like it, Right. But that comes as you're surrounded by this man's petty ego, because he has the woman who blogged about him locked up, and you know, and I kind of really enjoyed that. And again, it leads to those batshit crazy moments of them trying to escape a proton river in the middle of a pocket dimension. It's just like, what is this? Like, what is going on? And
that was a great sequence. The whole sequence was really fantastic. Like
the floating head,
the floating head of Metamorpho. You get Crypto, you know, like attacking all of Mr. Terrific's T-spheres. You know, which was hilarious. And like, you know, Mr. Terrific gets, you know, like a great, you know, he gets a great moment here when he, like, you know, decides to help break them out of the pocket universe.
And I loved all that stuff with Lois and Mr. Terrific. I think that stuff was great. And the whole the sequence set to Noah and the Whale's 5 years was
yeah, and like we, you know, I think we talked about Crypto a little bit, but you know, like you know, even though you see that Crypto's this like very badly behaved dog, but he's so lovable, and you know, the thing that makes Clark, you know, sort of just completely, you know, break down any pretense that, you know, he knows that it's Lex that he's fighting. He goes right into Lex's office and like flips his desk, and he's like, "Where's the dog? What did you do with my dog?" You know, and
I loved all that, you know, what dog, and then when he's drinking his coffee, ugly dog with a cape. It's just like it is a bit of moustache twirling there. I guess also we've got to talk about Eve, because there's a character now. Right away when you see her at the beginning of the film and she's taking selfies, you're like, who is this millennial fucking twit? Like, please get her off the screen. And yet becomes one of the most important characters.
And much smarter than she lets on, because obviously she's taking all these selfies, but knowingly, with all of Lex's like evil plans in the backdrop.
So she is played by an actress called Sarah Sampaio. I think I'm probably reading it wrong there. You know, my pronunciation is not the best. Now, one thing they keep secret from the audience, but gets revealed in the end credits, is that she's Eve Tessmacher. And Miss Tessmacher was a creation of the first Superman movie.
Yeah, the Donner Superman movie.
And I think much later on, she gets worked into the comics. And I love that they carried that through without resorting to having Lex shout "Miss Tessmacher" every 2 minutes, you know, the way that Gene Hackman did. But she, you know, again, I think there's a lot in the movie of people really struggling for connections, for very human connections. And she wants to be loved. And she, you know, she's one of them.
Loved by Jimmy Olsen.
Jimmy Olsen, yeah. And I really liked her, even though it's very broadly done. I actually really liked her kind of thing, and the mutant toes thing was hilarious.
The fact that Jimmy Olsen is like, you know, this ladies' man, and like, you know, all the girls are like all aflutter over Jimmy Olsen. It's very funny, and like, but I mean, in the comics, he's always kind of got some like, you know, love entanglement that goes wrong and stuff.
Did you notice that about the Daily Planet trio? Is what they seem to do was take their characteristics as dictated by years of film and comics and swap them a little bit, because normally women kind of would have been swooning over Clark Kent, because Clark Kent is still a good-looking guy, even though he's not Superman. He's still a good-looking guy. And Lois would have been the impetuous one flying off to get into danger at every moment. But instead, that kind of gets ported over to Clark. He becomes the impetuous one, or at least as Superman becomes the impetuous one. And she becomes the more not
grounded.
mild-mannered, but grounded, sort of, as I put it in the review that I just did, look before you leap tall buildings in a single bound. She's very much, be careful, don't do this, think about what you're doing.
That's true.
And
that's absolutely true.
And it's something that only hit me today, really. And I think they kind of mix and match with some of those personalities, which is quite nice. But I love the fact that Jimmy Olsen's the ladies' man.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that he's instrumental to the kind of plot of the thing. The whole story does feel like a comic. It does feel like a comic.
It does. And I love that about it. I thought, like, and like you said, where I critiqued like the kind of fast-paced opening of the film, I also feel it's completely what comics do. And so it's like on the one hand, it's like, as a film goer, it's almost like, like you're off on this speeding train right away. And I feel like that, as much as I feel like that adds to the plot in certain ways, it takes away from the plot in others. Whereas, when if you treat it as comic book storytelling, it's exactly right. You never, like, you start every comic book story already, just like at a breakneck pace. Generally, you don't get a whole lot of
few. Very, very few comics have the beginning, middle, and end in that order. You're kind of always, and then there's like a catch-up issue where it jumps, or half the issue is jumping back. Is the usual structure that and actually it's something that really primarily comes out of, I find, a lot of what we would class as indie comics, like Image, Dark Horse, and things like that, especially Image. And I think it's interesting to have the movie really run with that. I tell you what was funny. Recently, I took a look at. I wanted to take a look at Superman 3 and Superman 4, which are the least loved Superman films. Because I was thinking about them. I was watching Superman 3, which is not necessarily an entirely enjoyable experience to watch. It's not a well-made film. It's the downward slide of Superman movies. And that is a comic book plot. The whole giant supercomputer, the evil Superman, it's like that is right out of, if not directly from the comics, but definitely the spirit of the comics.
Speaking of evil Superman,
so we've got the Ultraman. Now it's slightly different here because he's not the Ultraman that we've met. But... Yeah, well, he's not He's also not the Ultraman that we've met before. He's not the Ultraman from Grant Morrison's JLA Earth 2.
No, he's simply a Superman clone that Lex has like control over. He's basically not fully formed to the plaque. To have his own, sort of, will. He's simply there to serve Lex's purposes and to, act as a, blunt instrument to take down Superman.
Yeah. And lest we forget, Lex Luthor trying to make a Superman clone is the plot of Superman 4. Like that, that is right out of Superman 4, The Quest for Peace. So
it also, I'm sure it's one of those things. It's been done in the comics.
Can you guess how he makes that Superman clone?
Go on. Is it the same way that he made it?
He uses a strand of Superman's hair.
Strand of his hair. Yeah, there you go.
So, I love that.
Right. So it's like, I feel like this movie just draws from everything.
Yeah,
from every Superman film, every Superman, as many comics as they can sort of draw inspiration from, every form of Superman like media. I feel like is sort of like somehow or other touched upon or winked or nodded at in the movie. So whether it's the good stuff or the bad stuff, or the stuff people think is really cool or the stuff people think is really lame, I feel like it has a sort of love for all of them. And so
And
it's like, yeah, here you go. This is what would have happened if they did make the clone, and here he is. And I thought that was well done. Like, you always knew throughout the movie, it's like, oh, okay, there's going to be some kind of reveal, who's under that mask. And it makes sense that it's like, oh, well, who could physically take down Superman? It's
unsurprisingly, a lot of the stuff was sort of pre-guessed by the internet. Like, I think one of the earliest guesses was like, this is Ultraman. And in fact, they even guessed that the Hammer of Barovia was Ultraman. And they guessed that the reveal from the end, one of the end credit sequences where Superman is just babysitting Crypto for Lara, was from, that was sort of pre-guessed by the internet. I mean, all in all, I love the movie. I love the fact that the end credit sequences didn't set anything up.
No, but they were there. I felt like more like any, it was at that point more than any other point in the movie that I sat and thought like, oh, okay, so this is now the equivalent to the Marvel movies. This actually feels like, probably what DC wanted to do, 10 or 12 years ago when they, sort of rushed with that, Batman v Superman movie to create an equivalent. Now they actually have the movie that would be the equivalent, to having the Marvel Cinematic Universe, their own version of that.
Isn't it interesting that James Gunn's answer to that is, I'm not going to give you a bunch of origin stories or sort of sideways things into this is Wonder Woman and this is, Batman and all this. It's just like they're there because they're there. They're there. They're just there. They've been there for years. And it's just like, yeah, fine. So you accept it almost by osmosis. And it's really interesting that he chooses to do that. And again, I'm just really taken with their structure and brevity of the film. But yeah, all in all, great. We should talk about the end credit sequences. So there are two in the film.
And
one...
like we should mention, obviously right before the end credit sequence, you do very briefly meet Millie Alcock as Supergirl.
Completely, pissed out of her mind. Come to get Crypto back, and very much taking the stuff from Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow, where she has to go off to other planets to get drunk because the yellow sun doesn't allow her metabolism to absorb alcohol. I liked that. I haven't seen House of the Dragon, which Millie Alcock I think features in the first.
She does, and I have seen it, and she's very good.
Yeah, I have seen the show she did for Netflix recently with Megan Fye, Sirens, which was I really enjoyed, and she was great in that. I actually didn't know until I saw an interview recently that she was Australian.
Oh, I didn't know that either.
Because I've only seen her do a British accent for Game of Thrones and an American accent for the show with Julianne Moore and Megan Fye for Sirens. So yeah, looking forward to that. Craig Gillespie, I feel like I kind of know his films already, but I haven't seen them. What's the second? There's a sort of mid-credit sequence, isn't there?
So the mid-credit sequence, I think, is the one where it's like, he's watching Crypto.
Yeah.
And then I think the far end credit sequence,
which was my absolute favorite because it's about nothing except a piece of characterization.
Yeah. What was it? Remind me, because I did say for it, but now I'm like, oh, what was it?
Where the interdimensional rift has torn the city apart and Mr. Terrific has sandwiched it back together.
Oh, yeah.
The building isn't straight.
It's not straight, so there's a crack.
And Clark points out that it's not straight. And he just looks at him and goes, well, "What do you want me to do? Tear it apart and put it back again?" Like, and
he's like, "Oh, I shouldn't have said anything." And
and I love that because he says something that actually is true to the film, where he goes, "I can be a real jerk sometimes," and it's just like, it's true. This is absolutely true of this Superman, and I love that. Absolutely loved it. So all in all, I mean, I think they're off to a great start.
Yeah, absolutely. Like and I think that they got Superman absolutely right. Yeah. And that is like not an easy thing to do. It hasn't been done in every iteration of Superman, live action. I think that they really get what the character is, get exactly what's great about him and what people have loved about this character for, nearly 100 years. Like it's, and I thought the casting was like just absolutely perfect. I can't wait to see more of these characters. I'll be really excited to see how this universe like moves forward.
Yeah, definitely. But also at the same time, I don't want to put any kind of weight of expectation on it. I would rather just watch each film as it comes. I think it'd be interesting to see this sort of approach taken with Batman, if that's what they decide to do for Brave and Bold. I still don't think that Andy Muschietti is the guy for that. I just don't, and I was not thrilled with either of the It films. I'm looking forward to Supergirl. I'm very curious about Clayface. But what I mean, I like the idea though that they're just going to make movies without necessarily building towards,
except that they will be. They will
probably
be.
But
but I think they're not rushing it. I think where they went wrong, in my opinion, with the Snyderverse, because I didn't think that went very smoothly at all. I think where they went wrong was trying to rush ahead without doing the work, without taking the steps that made it feel exciting and worthwhile when you actually got to crossovers and
well, when you look at the size of those movies, every one was aiming to be Infinity War, or Endgame.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like they were too huge for the weight of some of those characters.
I just feel like this is like, if they go about this right, which it feels like they will, it's like there's no rush. There's no big rush to get there. It's like make some good, enjoyable movies first, and then, then we can maybe get excited about seeing the characters interact.
I would say absolutely loved it, absolutely moved by it, in tears by the end. The only thing I would say is the people that didn't get enough time for my liking, I would like to see one more bit or two with Cat Grant and Steve, a bit more of the supporting characters, a bit more with Wendell Pierce, and a bit more with Isabella Merced as Hawk Girl. But I still think though the scenes they were in were brilliantly done. I like the fact that it wasn't overburdened with stars either.
Yeah.
In that they didn't surround the movie with super famous actors. Nicholas Hoult was the highest paid actor on this.
Yeah,
and I think
he made quite a lot more than David
Corenswet and Rachel Brosnahan. But he has.
But he's a proper A-list movie star.
He has a ton of movies behind him, and he already has one sort of superhero franchise behind him. Yeah. I hope this kind of gets more of Eddie Gathurgi out there as an actor.
He was great.
Yeah, fantastic.
That character was a real surprise for me because I didn't expect to care about him one way or the other, and then he was
and again the way
hilarious.
It was played, was Anthony Carrigan, fantastic. just generally Sarah Sampio.
Everyone was great. Everyone was great, and like and absolutely, just couldn't have been happier walking out of that film.
No, and definitely want to see it again. Definitely want to see more Superman movies, and I hope that Gunn is the one who to kind of take those through. But yeah, brilliant stuff, really. Brilliant stuff. I think it'll actually be a while before we see another Superman movie, because
I think so too.
I think he'll now get busy overseeing the next 2 or 3 or 4 movies. But yeah, certainly an interesting director, and so unsurprisingly has emerged one of my favorite directors. And these two, like, give me these two in films all day long. They were lovely. I like, genuinely, what an adorable relationship that was. Like, I loved the way they played it, and their final moment in the film is, chef's
beautiful.
kiss.
Just beautiful.
Anyway, that's it for us. At the Comic Crush .bsky.social, at the Comic Crush on Threads and Instagram, the Comic Crush on Facebook. That's where you can find us. Do check out the Superman shop in the Comic Crush web shops. There's about 13 or 15 different shops now that you can browse through for comics. I've got thousands of comics for sale. Do check those out. UK only, though, I'm afraid. Do contact me if you're from outside the UK and you'd like to buy something, and we can perhaps make arrangements there. But that's it from us. Follow Liz if you want more slightly incorrect opinions on
Brilliant
films. Opinions on films, but in a bob haircut. Liz has been your Lois Lane. I have been your Jimmy Olsen, and it's been a pleasure doing this. God, Liz, our podcasts are getting longer and longer. Nearly an hour and 50 minutes on this one.
I know, yeah.
I've really got to learn to shut up.
I keep saying that.
Right, goodbye, guys. Thank you very much for watching. You can listen on Spotify, iTunes, or watch us on YouTube. Thank you very much for tuning in. It's been lovely doing this. We're tired now. Bye-bye.
Bye.